Hey, this is Matt Wenning from WenningStrength.com, and today we're going to talk about big techniques for big arms. So if you want big arms, pay attention, and hopefully I'll give you some tips that you may not have thought about. So what you have to understand about big arms first is that the tricep is bigger than the bicep. So that automatically should tell you that the tricep has more potential for mass. And that means that you have to train the tricep really, really hard if you want big arms. Now, how do we do that? Well, one, I really like using cable stuff for triceps, and one reason alone, it stays the exact same weight through the range of motion. So here at 60 pounds, what I got on there, here at 60, here at 60, and here at 60. So it stays consistent. A lot of times resistances don't, depending on what they're doing, right? Now, the other trick with is when you're doing push downs, like what we're doing now, and you want big arms, you got to make sure you lock the downward position. Don't short stroke it and try to keep tension on the back, right here. That's what's flexing the horseshoe and making everything grow. The other thing if you want big arms is, like we talk about with a lot of our training, is you got to change the angle. How do we do that? Well, one, we can use TRX handles, and we can do it this way. Now, what this is going to do is create a ton of pressure right here at the most flexed position. Now, when I come up and flex, it's a little lighter and easier here because I'm standing more upright. I find that things that are harder here for the tricep create a lot more mass, especially down here in the lower part of the elbow. So TRX handles are really good for changing angle and pressure and making the exercise very different than a cable movement. Now, the next exercise that you'll want to use is going to rely on you using dumbbells. Now, what I like about using dumbbells is the fact that you can separate the arms. So on the other two exercises, the arms could work together. On these, they have to work separate. And when you do isolateral movements, you tend to turn on a little bit more muscle with a little lighter weight. Now, here's the difference though. When you're working on muscle size, what you want to do is slow everything down. So if I'm going to do this, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to negate the tricep tendon and force most of the muscle to do all the work. So if I come down and do this and just throw it, now my muscle is being used like a spring. Therefore, I'm not getting very much contraction. So you'll find that for muscle size, if I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, I just made this 25 to 30% harder, and now the growth on this is going to be much better for muscle size. So don't get twisted that doing something heavier is going to build more muscle. Sometimes doing things more strict under tempo will build more muscle. So one of the only ways I think that you're going to be able to develop a big bicep and really focus on it is to use an incline concentration curl or a preacher bar, preacher setup. So now the difference is that I learned this from Charles Poliquin, which had 20 to 20 and a half inch arms, only weighed like 185 pounds. He would lower everything in a hammer grip, come down, turn, supination, and then lift it. Notice I'm using no speed, controlling the entire way up and the entire way down. Now this is going to force me to use a lot of muscle tissue and not put a lot of strain on the tendon. Remember that putting on big muscles is not always about lifting heavy weights. It's about controlling, not using a lot of tendon stretch reflex, and focusing on the contraction. So lower in a hammer, reverse, and curl it normal. You'll notice that this will put on a lot of muscle size. I saw Charles using these twice a week, separated between 72 hours, and he had some of the biggest biceps I had ever seen. Now the trick is that weight is not really that crucial. It's the focus of the contraction. So a lot of the guys that I've known that have humongous arms, they tend to focus more on contraction than they do lifting heavier weights. So on that preacher curl that we just saw, we were really focusing on building up the bottom of the bicep attached to the elbow. Now we're going to focus on the bicep head itself. So the trick with this is, a lot of pro bodybuilders, you don't need to go heavy on this, is you turn it up like you're going to do a normal, right? So it look like a normal alternating bicep curl. But the trick is now when I come up, I'm going to kick my elbow back. So watch. So I'm trying to almost pull it to my shoulder. This is really going to hit the peak and really focus on you not being able to use a ton of muscle or a ton of weight. This is going to be a lot of muscle. So I actually learned these from Flex Wheeler, and Flex Wheeler had 21-inch arms at 220 pounds body weight, and he told me that he would do sets of 25 with only a 25-pound dumbbell. So in closing, we talked about how to build big arms, and hopefully it made you think a little bit. 1, it's not about how much weight you can move, it's the quality of the contraction. 2, putting your body in a position that it uses the maximal amount of muscle tissue, not necessarily the maximal amount of weight. And 3, you need to rotate your exercises. I gave you some of my favorite ones to do, which were Poliquin curls and using a lot of cable movements. So just remember, when you're trying to train your arms, focus on actually what you're doing, and that's putting the pressure on the muscle and not necessarily worrying about utilizing a ton of weight and a ton of tendon stretch reflex.